exploration. Yesterday we heard the first movement in several performances. Barenboim was the final performance, and it was very good. Maria Grinberg, and I forgot who else. Now, the second movement is a wonderful andante. And this work is very problematic in the sense of putting it together, even though the movements are straightforward. In fact, it's very simple to fall asleep during performance because it's a long work. And I must say that the last time I heard it,
you fell asleep.
I fell asleep during the sonata. I mean, and I happen to have worked on this sonata for at least 2 years on and off. And I love the lyricism and beauty of it. And yet you really have to play it so beautifully.
Dare I ask who the performer was, or would you rather not?
No, I don't even remember, frankly.
Okay.
I don't. I go to concerts often, and sometimes when I fall asleep I forget then the performer. It wasn't the performer, it was probably I was tired. But I wanted so much to hear this sonata because I love it. And I had practiced it myself often. But that was my last experience with it. I have not heard it since. So I'll take it movement by movement and then try to get through the whole. Actually, the title Pastoral is not bad, especially for the last movement. This second movement, Andante, is it's how can you describe it? You can't describe it. We'll hear it. Beethoven loved it even after he became quite a different composer in the sonata form, and would often just play this movement. So Czerny, his pupil, assures us. Now, performance of this Andante movement, the second movement of Opus 28, composed in 1801, published in 1802, the performer Schnabel.
Are you awake?
Oh, yes. A wonderful reading of the Andante movement of the Pastoral Sonata.
That's a very lovely work.
Let's have a performance now by Wilhelm Kempff. Kempff at his best in this movement. Absolutely wonderful. This is the Pastoral Sonata. That was the Andante movement, which is in D minor. Has a middle section with no material from the opening part at all, and it's in D major. It goes back, so it's an ABA form to the opening, and then has a coda. And it was composed in 1801. And the four sonatas that we have been listening to, Opus 26, the two fantasy sonatas, Opus 27, which includes the Moonlight, and this one were composed in 1801. And Eric Blum thinks that these are the most significant pieces of that year. Next in importance are the two violin sonatas, Opus 23 and 4. Otherwise, he writes, these 12 months were lean enough. The ballet of the Creatures of Prometheus, though it contains delightful music of a rather formal kind, was, as Haydn somewhat acidly remarked, not a creation by a long way, nor was the string quintet in C major, Opus 29, of great importance, much less the cello variations and a theme from the Magic Flute, and the 12 country dances for two violins and bass, which complete the output for the year. Well, I wouldn't call that a lean year, but well, it's showing, of course, Beethoven's main preoccupation with the major form, and which is the sonata, and of all his works, the piano sonatas are the most in number. Let's hear another performance of the second movement of the Pastoral, and that's Paul Badura-Skoda coming in. Badura-Skoda, Paul is his first name, in a performance of the slow movement of the Pastoral Sonata, Opus 28, a name not given by Beethoven, but by a publisher in Hamburg, Kranz. This is a very important sonata, and not only musically, but it is another stop-off point in Beethoven's development in the form which he so exploited that other composers had to be, in their sonatas, measured against Beethoven unfairly, Schubert being the closest example, because Schubert's sonatas did not undertake the same line of development or attitude. For a good 100 years, they weren't appreciated. Schubert was a romantic, a transitional figure who tried to weld, and he did try desperately and with great success in the last couple of sonatas, his lyrical impulse to the vastness of the sonata form. Beethoven worked his first movements out on a motivic development, a pregnant protein kind of thematic material which so totally suited the sonata allegro form. But this is the last sonata, or to be pronounced properly, sonata, that Beethoven would use the definite, classical, normal four-movement form. And fortunately, Eric Blum sees this, and I'd like to read it to you. The present sonata, it must be confessed, is in no sense an advance upon Opus 27, the fantasy sonatas. It contains a good deal that is fanciful and imaginative, but nothing that is particularly prophetic, and it reverts to the classical form, a regular sonata movement, a piece in a moderate tempo based on the song form, the movement we just heard, a scherzo, which we will hear in a minute, and a final rondo. It may be noted that Beethoven here for the last time uses the four-movement plan in a piano sonata. 3 movements predominate hereafter, and as he goes on there is a tendency towards 2 movements, a compression compensated for by greater enlargement within each piece. Where there are still 4 movements by way of exception, some other departure from the conventional plan is to be found. Thus, Opus 31, number 3 in E-flat, has both a scherzo and a minuet between 2 movements in sonata form. Opus 101 has a march movement instead of a scherzo, and an adagio that is not complete in itself, but leads straight into the finale. And if that be regarded as a 4th movement, then we must also look upon the largo introduction to the fugue finale of Opus 106 as a 5th one. Or if we do not, but say that there are 4 movements in the Hammerklavier 106, with a scherzo and an adagio, even then we must recognize, among other irregularities, that the finale is quite contrary to tradition, a fugue. In Opus 110, the slow movement and finale, also a fugue, are certainly fused inseparably. So in the Opus 28, 18-1, Beethoven is for the last time using the conventional 4-movement plan. Now the scherzo movement, this is an interesting movement, because the trio of this little scherzo is based in B minor, a key that Beethoven absolutely detests. I know offhand of no movements in Beethoven in B minor. That, of course, is such an interesting subject. How much Bach loved B minor. How much Mendelssohn loved E minor. And on. How F sharp minor meant to certain composers. C minor for its certain melodrama. D minor for its nostalgia. F sharp minor is, of course, a very popular key in the 19th century. But here's the little scherzo played by Arrau of the Pastoral. for me, a stodgy performance of this scherzo from the Pastoral Sonata. Let's try Alfred Brendel. Scherzo from Opus 28. I'm not satisfied, though. That was Brendel. Let's try Artur Schnabel. Schnabel. Well, I'm getting in one of those moods that I can't get satisfied.
You just can't be pleased.
Some days it happens that way.
Okay, let's try one more.
Grinberg.
Okay.
Robust. Maria Grinberg. I like that. Now, Kempff, who plays this sonata in whole very beautifully. I love Kempff's performance, and we heard the Andante movement, which was just masterful. Let's hear his scherzo. It's marked Allegro Vivace. Wilhelm Kempff in the scherzo. Perhaps this movement has to be played even faster. Let's return to the most charming movement imaginable of the Pastoral Sonata after this message. Grinberg in the finale of the Pastoral Sonata, Opus 28, the key of D major. dazzling moments before the end, Più allegro quasi presto, is still based on the base of the opening of the theme of the beginning of the sonata. And Blohm writes, no art but music is capable of thus making things appear the same and yet not the same. And Beethoven is among the musicians who best understand the secret of such subtle transformations. Another performance of this rondo finale, and Artur Schnabel is the artist. finale of the Pastoral Sonata of Beethoven, Schnabel the player. Tomorrow we will begin a complete performance of the sonata and the first artist, Ivan Moravec. Join us then, and thank you for listening.